I
Wait
missed.
for it. Wait for it. I think I'm supposed to start this week. Hey, Roland, how's it going?
Good, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Sorry to cut you. I'm just like, I think, yeah, I was supposed to start this one.
That was funny. You're wait. I'm like, we're on air, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. Um, this week, my episode is brought to you by the cage that I'm living in right now. So now you're getting a different perspective of this room. Anybody who's watching can see what I'm talking about. If you're not watching, I'm in my podcast room, the office, but it's being redone. It's being renoed. So the last couple of weeks, I think you could see me. I was sitting at the desk, and you could see behind the desk. Now I'm sitting facing the other way because we got back from vacation, and everybody has to have the Wi-Fi. Like my son is dying. He's like, "Can you set up the Wi-Fi the minute we get in the house?" I'm like, "No, we got to bring everything in. We got to get back to normal, and then I will set it up." But so I drag all this stuff back into this office, but hook it up in a way thinking that the gentleman who's doing the reno will be back the next morning. So I'm doing just a quick setup so I can do a quick tear down. Then I find out he's not coming. So now I got to set everything up, but he's got a lot of his work stuff on the desk. So I'm like a traveling computer show. So I figured today you're going to see the where the shelves are going to be, and it looks like I'm in a room being interrogated. That's what it reminds me of. I just have this white space, and I've got the mic, and I'm supposed to tell you, Chris, to send help, send money, so I can be released from this place. Anyway, that's I missed talking. I missed the podcast. I was jonesing for it a little bit when I was away, but I texted you, I think yesterday, that it was nice to be away. Like when I don't know about you, but when I'm away, I'm not here at home. I forget the context of what it's like to be here at home, and I really enjoy my time away. So when I came back, I was like, yeah, we got a podcast. We got to get back on. I know you had messaged me. You're like, hey, when are we doing this again? Because my vacation was kind of a weird timing, but I missed it. So it's good to be back.
Funny on that, because I think about, I don't have the same experience right now because we're not taking any blocks of vacation. We're just doing short hops back and forth. And there's a whole lot of stuff that sort of set that up for this year. Last year we did Disney. So we kind of hit this peak of family vacations, between sort of like the family budgets and just family stuff to work through this summer. It just wasn't a summer to have any extended time away. And I think, I don't know, I'll take that as just kind of like the ebb and flow of how you plan. I would love, to a degree, I would love to be able to say every year that we have this dedicated vacation time. It's the, maybe there's a truth in there that non-educational workers, I mean, a lot of us probably assume that just because you have the summer off that amazing vacations happen. They don't. Not always. Sometimes it's about, like we were talking about in the on-ramp, setting up that list of, we're going to go to the zoo this year and we're going to go get a burger or go get some food adventure. But this past summer has been more about staying. Look at what I said. I just said this past summer. We're like just creeping past the halfway mark. But this summer has been about kind of staying local. So I've never really released myself entirely from let's say the digital tether or the life tether, like where I feel like I've sort of gone to a space where I've forgotten. I guess that's kind of it. Like where you can actually, I haven't had the day. Maybe there was one day where this might be a good measure of how deep you're falling into your summer, where you say, what day is it? What, like literally like the name of the day and the number. We haven't had that. I've had it in the past, but I haven't had it this year. This isn't to say that I haven't had a lot of great experiences with my family and my downtime. I'm just noticing that without the scheduled away time, the summer feels different. Just kind of noticing that. And in some ways, it's probably good that we didn't have major blocks away, because there's just stuff going on in life and with family that it's good that we're here to deal. I have to be honest, it's good that we're here to deal. You feel the I'm like mourning the loss of what would be the stereotypical teacher's summer, or maybe the comes with the promotional package or whatever newspapers say about teachers getting 2 months off. Like, you get caught up in that spin, like you're going to have a lot of free time, and you're going to have a lot of downtime, and you're going to have a lot of mindful time. Doesn't always happen. doesn't really happen. It's great that it's there. I mean, it's more likely to happen because we do have scheduled summers off, but it's felt pretty busy. It's felt pretty busy. And like you, and I would agree with you. I'm looking forward to having a conversation. I think coming into the summer session, the summer school thing, I wondered what would spark our conversations, because we didn't have that very specific, our feeds driving our thoughts, so to speak. Have you felt like our conversation has shifted to a different place, or are we still kind of continuing with the flow?
I think it has, well, it's a bit of both, but I do feel like there's been a shift, and I kind of like it. I feel like the shift is what happens to teachers over the summer. Like, I think really the conversations we're having, or that we've had so far. Like, remember one week I forced us back into the classroom. I forced us with me talking about Stealing Fire, the book. I
Mm-hmm.
was forcing myself to apply it. Um, because I think that it's true. This notion or concept that we're going to have tons of time. We don't have as much time as we think that we're going to have. It's really weird. It's deceiving. But no, I think we're still veering on the teacher path. It's just not what it has been for 10 months, right? Because for 10 months, well, don't get me wrong. Last week of August, when you and I talk, we're going to be talking about going back, or at least I am, right? It's going to hit me. And I'm doing my best to shield myself from that impact because it's jarring for me. And I'm an old dude now. I don't like that jarring sensation anymore. When I was younger, it would wake me up. I'd be like, okay, end of August, boom. And I would feel like, okay, I need to snap out of it now. Knowing it's coming in, 3 weeks, I'm putting my armor on and I'm bracing myself for the impact. And it's going to be a harder impact than normal because a new school, different grade. The grade thing is not so going to be so shocking to me because I've taught it before and I'm not that far removed from primary. It's only been 3 years. And then I've used a lot of primary strategies and techniques in the junior classroom. So that shouldn't be the jarring part for me. For me, the jarring part is a new school, new staff, new people, not knowing how the culture is of the school and how it works. That sucks because my first field trip, I'm gonna have to talk to everybody and figure, okay, how do you guys do this here? Who do I bother? Where do I get the paperwork? Right? Tell me. All my firsts are gonna be like, it's a pain in the neck. It sucks. Some people tell you, oh, it's exciting. No, it's not. Not when you've got 20 kids in your class, you have to teach them and you got to do everything else. It's not exciting to me. It causes me some anxiety. Now, like I can say that because I'm older and I gotta say, the one thing about this summer is helping me move forward with is really figuring out what I care about and not care about. Right? Like, so when I say on the podcast that it's not exciting for me to have to do all these things new again and figure out new ways of being, that's not exciting to me. I wouldn't have said that 5 years ago. I would have been worried what people might think if they heard me say that. But I can safely say I don't really care. And I don't mean that in like people walk around and say, I don't care, I don't care. It's not like that. It's just like, it really is not a focus for me. It doesn't matter to me what people are thinking of me in that respect. Um, there are other things that I think about when it comes to other people's opinions about me and my way, but not that. So I think, to answer your question, I think that we veered off the traditional talk that we've been having for 10 months. But that's because our context is different. I'm not in a classroom anymore. I don't have 27 kids to talk to you about and our experiences and what I'm reflecting on. Now I'm reflecting on how I'm going to navigate in this new school. I'm reflecting on other things I don't have a chance to think about because I'm too busy doing the classroom teacher thing, and I'm giving my brain power to that. I'm not giving it to the things that I'm thinking about now, which are great because the things I think about during these 2 months tend to rejuvenate me for the school year. It's like a cycle. Like, um, I will have thought reflectively about like me and who I am and what I'm about these 2 months, that when I get to September, I don't want to think about it anymore. I want something new to think about. And it's perfect because I'm going to have a lot of new things to think about come this September. So I just think that, in my opinion, our summer school episodes have been about the summer and what's happening. Where like I got to go on 2 real vacations this summer. So that's just my life, right? And the whole what day is it? I'm in the middle of that right now. Like for our podcast this morning, I woke up and I did some things to jar me back into reality. I I know you're but if you could see the look on Chris's face, if you're just listening to this, you gotta check out the YouTube stuff just for giggles, right? Like just for fun. But like I woke up at a certain time, I showered, and I did some domestic things around the house. And I know most people are like, what's he talking about? Some mornings I just roll out of bed, turn on the computer, and we do the thing. But today it was like, no, I need to be jarred back into reality. And so I followed like a bit of a routine and did some things that I don't normally do or haven't been doing during this summer school decoded podcast. So okay, Chris, like I dislike it when I go off on a tangent like that. It bothers me, but I don't seem to stop myself from
No,
doing
I got you. I'm going to do a wrap around here. I totally got you. So there's stuff that you and I have talked about on this podcast that I don't think we realize the true scope of it, because we're interested. We sort of introduce one part of the idea, and then at some point we get the counterpoint to it. And I think we just hit a counterpoint to one of our previous episodes. Do you remember you and I talking about the oh, I wish I could throw down what oh, you know what? I just realized can you even hear me? Is my audio good? It is, eh? My mic is way behind my computer. Let me bring it forward a little bit. Maybe I should move it. How's that? Is that better?
I think I'd rather stare at the mic in your face.
Totally messing with my setup here. It's kind of like if I were talking all the time, like, yeah, you know what? I got this really great idea. Can't you see the look on my face right now? I'm like, no. So way back in the day, we talked about that morning plan and what that looks like when the routine of the morning goes off the rail. A kid is sick, the car doesn't work, you're snowed in, something's missing, your dog is sick. The stuff that sort of pulls that morning routine off the rails. I think that's that's one part, that's one bookend to this conversation where we're now at. What happens when you have no morning routine? So that idea of, yeah, you like just kind of rolling out of bed and kind of like, there's no tension, there's no stress, there's no stressors, good or bad, to give you something to kind of like cling to in the morning. And I think about how regimented the school year is. And this year it'll be slightly different because my spouse and I are changing portfolios, but also changing schools. We're reversing in some ways. Sorry, a lot of ways. Previously, because of where we were positioned, I was doing drop off in the morning and she'd be doing pickup. We're flipping. So now she's doing drop off, I'm doing pickup. The school that she was at is now if I put us at sort of like, a center spot, the school that she was at was down in the little bit more in the southern part of our school board. She's now moving as north as possible. I was a little bit in the north, and now I'm going south. We are completely reversing. The high school that I'm going to is actually 10 minutes from her previous high school. So figuring out what the new routines are, what I love, the reason that, one of those, me kind of laughing and smiling is that that week, also she starts early. So her school starts in the last week of August. And because she's shifting into a different role, she'll be there the week before that. So the last 2 weeks of August is going to be taken up with her on ramp into her new school, let alone the leadership portfolio that she's moving into. For me, I'm just not entirely sure yet what my September is going to look like. So that week will be me going in the opposite direction down to the school. We're having some in-laws come in and help us out. But figuring out, I don't know. Okay, it's one thing to sort of think about the absence of routine and maybe appreciating the absence of a routine. Connected with that is sometimes the absence of a routine doesn't feel that great. Like you almost like you want something to kind of be a driver to sort of like pull you through your day. I think for me, what it comes down to, so that I have an appreciation more of what my downtime is, the reality of my downtime. And then the sort of third layer to this is what happens when your previous learning about routines and sort of setting things up doesn't really apply. The skill set, the skills might, but the collection together you can't use anymore. Like we can't use really anything about the timing and the actual gymnastics of getting ready in the morning in September. We're going into a brand new prototype. And I think back to this conversation starting, what happens in the morning? How do you negotiate that, getting your lessons in, like when stuff doesn't go according to the plan? And for both of us having, educators as teachers, as parents, it's a trade-off. Okay, who's going to be, who might have to stay home today? Who is it? What's going on at the school to sort of say, I need a down day. That's why I was smiling. That was my little micro moment that I thought about, because I fully appreciated that our summer school sessions are kind of running parallel to some of the conversations that you and I had, but I do feel the away time as well. Like I appreciate that. I was actually talking to another podcaster trying to articulate the value of spending time in the Decoded podcast in relation to what I had sort of established with my other podcast. And I think in spending time here, what was a diversion from the previous plan has become a new plan, a new interest, a new space to talk about education in a new way with it's funny because I think about when we started it, and I was totally on, like I was thinking, yeah, we're gonna have lots to talk about, but I actually wasn't sure if I wasn't sure of the spaces of what we would talk about. It's kind of a weird thing. Like I knew that we would find a way to talk because I think we do that well. And I knew you and I were connected. I was listening back to some of the episodes, and I really dig the spaces that we talked about in relation to education. And I don't know if I was, and I'm not throwing any shade on our process. I wasn't entirely sure that we would have content for a weekly. I wasn't sure. Yeah, you smile, you laugh. It's just it's a funny thing because it is in some ways it makes me think about our time away in the summer, as in you sort of leave the summer thinking that you're going to have all this extra time and you're not quite sure what you're going to do. And then all of a sudden you're midsummer and I've filled my time. I haven't been sitting around doing nothing. but I didn't know without having that scheduled vacation. I mentioned this in the on-ramp. We don't have a scheduled vacation this year. There isn't a thing that we're sort of hanging all our organizational tools around. Yet somehow we've had a pretty good summer doing a bunch of different visits. So there you go. I just went off and I stole the fire there. What?
You make me think of a couple of things. Dude, do we have enough to talk about on the podcast? Are you kidding me? Our text messages back and forth all week could turn into a book. Because stop and think about the things you and I have been exchanging over text or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. I read an article, boom, I send it your way. I see a graphic from one of these entrepreneur influencers like Gary Vaynerchuk or Jocko Willink. Boom, I send it your way. If we just focused on the nonsense we've been passing back and forth via our mobile devices, we could talk for days at a time per episode. Really, if you really want to step out of it and think about that. Now, I know not all of it applies to teaching, but it applies to our life and how we're living, and we bring that into the classroom. So when you said that, I laughed because I could turn on my phone right now and pull up like 5 or 6 things and say to you, which one do you want to talk about for the next 2 hours? Easily. Because you and I don't get the chance to actually talk like humans talk. I mean, we just don't. It brings me back to when I was a teenager, and in the summer, I would literally sit in my friend's basement for hours on end, and all we did was talk and play video games. I don't do that anymore. There's no time to sit. I can't go to your house and sit in your basement for 4 hours every couple of days. It's just not going to happen. I mean, it'd be really cool, which would never happen. But if one week I was sitting in your basement and you were sitting in my office, that reversal, but yeah, it's not going to happen. So what you said brought me back to something else. So, and it has to do with the summer and it has to do with teaching, but in a loose way. So you hadn't put out an episode on your other podcast, Chasing Squirrels, for a couple of months, correct?
True. March.
Okay, March. Wow. Dude, you've been slacking. But anyway, he's laughing, everybody. It was a joke. I was just joking.
There's something to that though, because I'm gonna agree with you. It was intentional slacking. And I love the word, like whether because it really did that idea of putting slack into your approach was exact. Like I had to put, this is what I love about this wordplay that you and I do. The idea of putting slack into my podcast was exactly what I needed to do because of and I'd still throw down anybody wants to sort of, try doing any sort of a podcast. Doesn't matter the genre. Heck, just sit there and whistle or burp for an hour. Someone is going to listen to it. No joke, right? Someone will. Someone will pick up the feed. You'll have someone throw you down 4 stars saying something like, I didn't know it was the podcast I needed, but I so want it right now. Can't wait for episode 2 where it's like hiccups and burps. People will listen. That challenge of putting down the podcast, though, it does become it's a machine. It really is. And it can become a monster because part of the scheduling and, as you said, the grind and the getting people to talk to, and then having the sort of like the constant thinking of, wow, this moment would make a great topic to sort of flesh out somehow. Like it gets in your head. The downside to it is that it wound me up pretty tightly because in order for me to satisfy this invisible monster, like I have to put out a good episode, it started to sort of wear me down. It started to sort of pull me down. And I thought, I think I'm falling further away from what I enjoy, which is just that open exploration of education. So I love the slacking part of it, but I think slack is exactly what I needed in order to sort of get a little bit off balance. And it was in that space, I'll tell you, it was in that space that I was open to our conversation about trying this on. So I don't think I could have seen the value of it, potential value of it, if I had been commanding and holding on to that schedule of I need to find somebody else to talk to. And it's funny. I don't know if you got to this space. I've had a hard time letting go of as I read my feeds, to appreciate what's in the feed and not think to myself, oh, I feel compelled to sort of ask this person to have an extended conversation. And I pause and I say, am I doing this because I feel like I have to put out another episode? Or am I doing this because I'm genuinely interested in finding out more stuff? And it was only when there was that slack in the rope that was beneficial to me.
And I appreciate you jumping in and talking about that intentional buffer that you built, right? Because I know you well enough that when you told me, actually, I don't think I ever said anything to you about it, because I follow your podcast and I don't think nothing was popping up in my podcast feed, and I don't think I ever said anything to you about it because I just know, I know, like, I think I know who you are as a person as far as I can from the relationship that we have. And I was like, whatever, he's got other things going, he's doing other things, he'll get to it. Um, but when I was in Ottawa, I went out for some exercise and I listened to your latest podcast episode, and I enjoyed the in real life uh, chemistry, I guess you want to call it, with your guest. Because I remember you were telling me before I listened to it, you were telling me that, and I hope I'm not giving away any secrets or anything, but you were talking about how you were changing, like, the way you were feeling about your podcast and how it would work in the process, and you wanted to do more face to face interviews or conversations that would be recorded for the podcast. And this was your first one. Well, it wasn't your first one, but it was your first one after you told me your idea about wanting to go more organic that way. And so here's where Roland's going to wrap like 3 or 4 stories into one. I was listening to it as I was walking in my old neighborhood. So I was like feeling great. I'm out and about, which is something I heard on a podcast yesterday. And it goes back to what you were talking about with routines. So here's one of the stories. It's going to go into the big story, and then I'll come back to me walking and listening to your podcast. Yesterday, it caught my eye on Instagram. Um, this guy, Andy Frizella, he's an entrepreneur, and he has I can't say it online because it's swearing, but he calls himself the MF CEO. Okay, so I think you can, the mother F CEO, and he's
Yep.
got this thing called the MF CEO Project Podcast. And as I was flipping through Insta, I saw his thing, and he posted like a 10 or 11-minute podcast um, about how to be happy. If you want to be happy, do these 2 things, and you'll be the 2 things you can do right now to be happy. And it was like 10 minutes. So I'm like, I looked around the house. My wife was out. My kids were playing. I'm going to listen to it. 10 minutes. I got nothing to lose. And one of the things he was talking about to make you happy is um, having your time to do what you need to do. And part of that is routines. So when you're not in routine, his theory, his concept is, when you're not following your routine, when you're not putting in the work, you're going to start to feel down. You're going to start to feel off kilter. You're going to feel like the equilibrium's gone. And then once you're back in routine, you may start to feel like, oh, I'm a slave to this routine. But his thing is, you want to be happy, keep up your routine. And as you grind, you can reflect on that and say, whoa, I got a lot of work done there. I did a lot of things I wanted to do. And he's got a point in a way, because when I stopped doing Roland Chidiac Connects, I felt a down. Even though I knew I had to stop doing it, it was that muscle memory, right? That routine of like sitting down, the the um, the nuance that comes with meeting somebody and then inviting them on to the podcast, and and arranging it and talking to them. Like, all that is work, but there was satisfaction that came with that work. So when I put that down, I did feel like something was missing, something wasn't right with me. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that at you. I'm out. I'm listening to your podcast. You two are at Starbucks, and I'm enjoying the back and forth. And as I'm walking down, I walk through a path and I came out onto a street. Now here's the other story. I I'm walking down the street, and to my left is a minivan, and it was stopped down the road, but I could tell that it was about to start up and come at me. And there was a lady. The lady driver was wearing a hijab, and she had like 4 or 5 kids in the car. And the car started moving, coming at me, and the windows were down, so I could hear them. They were speaking Arabic or some Middle Eastern type language, is how what my brain tells me. And as they're approaching the stop sign, I'm walking this way. The car's coming at me, and there's a middle-aged man riding his bike, and he's riding his bike towards me. So she's on his right, and he's not riding very fast. And as he's approaching, he's now like come right to where I'm at, and he looks over at the van and he says the F word, and then followed by the word Muslims. So F Muslims. I've got my earpods in, and the volume's high enough that I can hear your conversation, but low enough that if somebody honks or whatever, I'm aware of my surroundings. And this guy says this, and I finish crossing and I turn, and he's gone because of the way the road was. It was like a quick turn. He was gone. Okay, so why am I telling that story? I'm telling that story because number one, I couldn't believe how crazy this was that this dude just said this out loud. That's the first thing. The second thing was he talking to me or was he talking to the lady? Because as he was approaching, he saw me, but then he looked over and saw the car and heard the chaos in the car in a different language with the woman dressed stereotypically like an Islamic person, if you will, if you allow me that generalization. And he says it, and I'm like, so I'm thinking, did that just happen? Is he talking to me? The third thing is this is my neighborhood. This is where I grew up. If you look around, it's funny. There were so many stereotypes. You look around at the houses there, they don't look like houses where this is going to happen, right? This is supposed to be a safe space. It wasn't. And then I think about me and my identity, not just my identity as like my identity as a person. Who am I? Who am I? Am I influenced by the way I look? Am I influenced by the things I eat? Am I influenced by the ideas of the people around me that I need to fit a certain way for them to accept me into their group or into their world or whatever the case may be? Next story. Yesterday, I'm having a Google Hangout um, with a colleague, Jason, in Toronto, and he's a Google certified innovator, and I'm acting as his mentor for his project. And we're talking, and Jason's initial project was to create this really amazing app that could do some really cool stuff. And then it shifted halfway through his time, his project shifted, and he's gone down the road of race and racial identity and how as teachers, how are we dealing with that? How are we dealing with equity? What types of things are we doing to to make education better for the students in front of us? And so I started talking about this story with him yesterday, just to explain racial identity. And, I'm a Catholic educator. There's nothing wrong with being Muslim, but I'm not. This person just assumes that that lady is a Muslim because of how she looked and the language in her car. I'm making assumptions. I don't really know what he was thinking. He wouldn't stop and have a conversation because I had some things I wanted to say to him, but he was gone. And then he saw me too, and I've got the big black beard and the olive skin, and so maybe he was referring to me as well. Uh, and then how does that impact me as a teacher? Next story is I start talking about the student that was in my class that came from Syria 3 years ago, who was on my podcast, who I talked about in a recent episode of Barba Grande, the other podcast I'm doing for Voice Ed Radio, and how that student, how his entering into my world really got me thinking about who I am and what I'm doing. And it has all taken me to a dark place, but it's taken me to a dark place where I can see the light. So let me explain. The dark place is me reflecting on my feelings of inadequacy, of not being good enough, of not being smart enough. But here's the killer. It's all wrapped around my identity, which that's the dark place that I have to I'm realizing that when I was in grade 4 and I brought Middle Eastern food to school, it was not being valued. It was not being treated in a way where the difference was a good thing. Those are not my memories. My memories are people making fun of the food I was eating, feeling shame and embarrassment of what I was bringing to school for lunch, which then causes problems. You don't eat in front of your friends, or you try to ditch the food that your parents give you, like all this ridiculous stuff. So my dark place is that I'm reflecting on those things that I've not it's been a slow release. It's not been like I've sat down and thought about it. All these things are coming together right now for me. So I'm in a place where I feel like even talking about it now, it's good for me. It's the light, but I'm not done with the dark. And so the work Jason's doing, I applaud his work. It's not assessment and evaluation. It's not curriculum design. It's not critical pathways. It's who am I? How do I feel about who I am? And what can I put down for the kids in front of me? Because ultimately, who I am is going to leak out into what I do with them. And what message am I sending to my students of color or my students who are the visible minority in the room? What message am I sending to them from the experiences I've had? Like I told Jason that the first time when I saw this kid, I saw myself. And I had thought that I had seen myself many other times in my career, but I haven't. I did not look into the eyes of the younger me until this kid arrived. For goodness sake, he even resembled me as a kid. I was looking at pictures at my mom's house. He even resembled me. The thick black hair and the kind of a little bit chubby on the chubby side. Um, and then I was careful every time he did something culturally appropriate for his culture. I had to think like 10 times over, how do I react to this? And the way I react, he might take something from that. Then I learned later on, after I was done working with him, I learned he told me, and not in these words, but this is the idea. He told me that when he came and he saw that his teacher was a Middle Eastern man, like the men he's used to seeing, having left Syria and come to Canada, he said he was going to follow my lead no matter which way I directed him. So if I had admonished him for his food and his language, he was going to take my lead. He was going to go with the flow that I put down, which makes me even more crazy because I could have easily torn this kid's culture apart because of my issues with my culture. Easily. He told me, but I didn't. Thankfully, my teacher brain was working and not all the things I've got buried into the Roland human brain. And I celebrated the food. I encouraged it. I encouraged the language. I remember the first time I told him when he said to me he wasn't sure how to explain to me his math. I just start talking in Arabic, dude. And he's like, "What?" He goes, "No, I'm in Canada. I speak English." I said, "If you need to explain to me what you're doing on that piece of paper in Arabic or Armenian, I'm listening." And he's like, "Well, do you understand?" I said, "I understand your Arabic. I won't understand your Armenian, but I'm gonna listen to you. Explain it to me. Like everybody else gets to explain it to me." And he literally looked at me like I was crazy. But I'm not crazy. It's something I learned in my ESL course. It's something before I took the ESL course because of him. Who spends $800 because of a kid? Right? Because that's essentially how it's broken down. Because of him, I needed to become a better teacher. And maybe it's because I thought I was teaching myself. It's so layered, eh? Like we got nothing to talk about, right, Chris? Um, but anyway, long story short, I'm gonna end it with this. I'm in the middle of dealing with all of that because I think it's gonna help me move in a way that's gonna benefit the people I'm with. I need to continue to flush this out. I need to continue to work on this so that it doesn't interfere because I I think for when you're a teacher for many years, you underestimate, I think, the influence you can have over people because you just think you go, you do your thing, it's what you do. But when this kid told me he was going to follow my lead, so if I shut him down with his food and I shut him down with his language, he was just going to go with the flow because of what he saw. So my identity was like a power. Like it was like permission for me to do what I want to him because it was familiar and he felt safe, but so safe that he was willing to like drop his culture because I said it was time to drop his culture because I didn't fit the mold anymore. I don't fit his mold. When he'd bring the food, I'd look at it and I'd be like, dude, I remember that from when I was a kid. And he's like, how come you still don't eat it? You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, how come I still don't eat it? Right? It's because of the life I'm living now. Um, and I would bother him to speak in Arabic just so I could hear it and remember. So, when he did talk to me in Arabic about his work, it was pretty cool because every s- I, I could get the gist of the code, right? Like it was his sentence. He'd say like a paragraph, and from that paragraph, I would get the gist of what he was saying. Um, and so that was the fourth story within the big story of you getting back to routine, but doing it purposefully. So what I'm taking from that is that's what I'm in the middle of doing right now. I'm trying to expose myself, which comes with a lot of really awesome stuff, but a lot of garbage that I've just not ever dealt with or not acknowledged. And I feel now with someone like you talking about your way, your purpose, people like Jason who are bringing racial identity to the fore and saying, no, man, this is who I am. This is who I am. I'm not going to put it aside because you don't like it or because it doesn't fit what your mold is. It's not how we operate here. I'm waking up to a little bit of that, and I'm dealing with. I have a lot of friends from high school who I don't really talk to anymore, but who used to say to me when I would pull the race card even saying it like that sounds so bad. But when I would talk about, hey, things are not working out for me here the way they're working out for you, and I think it's because of who I am and my identity, they would downplay it. They would downplay it every time. And when I think about that now, I think that that's wrong. Um, that's like me downplaying. So I work with the majority of my coworkers are women. Imagine a woman telling me a story about someone treating them in a way that would make them feel lesser human than me. And me saying, oh, come on, you're just messing around. That's not really what's happening. Imagine. Like, when I put it in that context, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that I would dismiss a gender that has been treated negatively since the beginning of time. And
Can
I'm
I
going to,
can I jump in on that too? And just because, and you, the the pause, the moment of pause that this student gave you was telling you you were almost someone that did that to me. So it's like you you were given a little bit of insight here, where despite the fact, maybe there was some immediate visual rapport with this student. They thought to themselves, "Here's someone that I'm cued into sort of being able to follow." Part of the gift of what this kid said is that they were going to follow your lead regardless of it was good or bad. So that whole, and who knows if we'll be able to unpack this. So this whole idea of being an ally, or being a part, or being a supporter, or being a mentor, you didn't even realize how precarious your positioning was in that until the kid kind of told you, for better for worse, I was going to follow your lead. And that to me becomes like just you miss stepping off the curb. It was so close, stepping off the curb. And in this, I haven't had a chance to talk to Jason. I think this may have popped up kind of in part where with the conversation with Alicia Pasquale, which was the part of the podcast that you were mentioning, is that idea that I don't know if I've had as many conversations. Definitely had, you talked about intersectionality, so like where your identity meets the things that you do. And I don't know if I still haven't come to terms with that. Haven't come to terms with what I need to do to be able to honor and recognize other people's intersectionality. I don't know if I've done the work yet to figure myself out. And again, taking that, don't even have a reason as to why I haven't. I don't need necessarily have, I think when I start to think about it now, there could be some fear there. There could be some happiness. There's going to be some sadness. I've only dipped my toe in it, kind of mentally thinking to myself, you know what? I should have a really good, considering I've been teaching now for 13, 14 years. I really haven't had the conversation with my mom about what kind of a student I was, what it was like to be the parent of me while I was a student. I haven't had that conversation. And I think in partially, unpacking some of the repressed identity ideas that I have about myself, eventually I'm going to have that conversation. I think if I don't, I'm sad in advance that if I didn't have that conversation, I haven't made time for it. I haven't made time to figure out who I am in order to sort of reveal some of the stuff that I have packed down in order for me to be effective in the classroom, so that I would say I'm not as necessarily a best version of me for students who are looking for that are on the exact same path of figuring themselves out. So I just, again, apologies for jumping in on that thing. I can remember back that podcast that you put out, and I had a multi-layered response to it. One, I thought to myself, the idea of speaking so frankly with a student in class was remarkable. Two, I think I was surprised only in so much as I had started to box your podcast as kind of um, your podcast was facing in a different direction. I didn't think of you using your podcast specifically for your classroom. And I think the third layer to that is that it started to put in my brain the idea that other things can be included in our professional reflection. For example, how others see what we do. And I felt like that was very much a reflection on, like a contemplative reflection on what Canadian school experience can be. So there, I'll stop. I think that's sometimes the thing about some of these reflective moments. There isn't necessarily a tidy, clean ending to it. Like, I don't have a good way to kind of like say that leap off point for you to go, oh, great point, Clough, I can take it to here. It's damn messy. It is damn messy.
That's part of the cool thing I think about this podcast. So you and I are both good with that. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be clean. It's not supposed to be clean, for goodness sake. Like, you try to create something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I get that. But sometimes it doesn't work that way, and doesn't have to. There's no rubric here for you and I. Nobody's evaluating us. And if they are, good for them. They're evaluating us. It doesn't have any power over us at this moment in time. We're just going with the flow. We're talking about what needs to be talked about. It's there's so many different layers to this thing, and it's a beast. And I think maybe that's why personally I've steered clear as much as I can, because it is a beast. But I think now I'm ready to enter in. Now I'm ready to, like, I'm just ready. Like, I've talked about it on my other podcasts. I talked with Jason yesterday and I told him, and I don't think he really understands. It's funny because I was his mentor, but I never felt like that. I always felt like I was learning so much from him, and the way his path is taken. We're talking this young, fresh teacher. I call anybody who's younger than me, I call young. He his work is empowering me. I told him that yesterday. His work, the work he's doing with the group of people that he's working with in Toronto, they're empowering people like me. And so, since his Ignite talk in the spring at the EdTech Summit in Kitchener, which you attended, since his talk about honoring students' names, I've been on a really cool trajectory. And I'll shut down my racial identity talk for now by telling this one last thing. There's a kid in my class, and I'm not gonna give away his name here for everybody to hear, but he was also from Syria, cousins with the other student that had such an impact on me. Um, One day we were joking, and I referred to him as Frank, and I told him why, and it was fun. Like, we had a big laugh or whatever, and then uh, I made sure to tell him, listen, I'm a nickname guy. I love to give my students nicknames based on things I see or things they've said, or whatever. And the rule is, if you don't like your nickname, you let me know, and boom, it's done. I'm not going to use it. And so we're in the middle of something, and I just dropped the word Frank on him, and then I pulled him aside. I said, listen, your name is very important, like your God-given name, the one that your parents gave you, and it's culturally significant. And just because you're here, I don't want you to lose your name, which is also something I discovered yesterday when I was talking to Jason. Happened to me. My name, Roland, is not an ethnic name. It's French. But even when I went to elementary school, they took my name and they changed it. And on all my primary education report cards, it's not my real name that they wrote on my report card. So my name wasn't even Mohammed, and they butchered it. It wasn't even like ethnically, from Middle East, and they butchered it. And Jason's talk reminded me of that. And so I said to this kid, listen, I'm calling you Frank in this moment in time because it fits. It came to me. And he goes, yeah, yeah, I like it. I don't mind. I said, yeah, but what you need to know is, if I start to get carried away, your real name's not Frank. and I need to and I need you to like help me honor that in a way. Like that's not your name. And it was funny because even he was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You need to hold on to your name. Don't ever forget who you are. Unless you decide to change it yourself, don't let other people change your name." And it was funny because it was one of these heart to heart moments where he's just looking at me like, "Okay, like, can I go play now?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." So I just wanted to throw the name there actually because when I was talking to my mom, she showed all this connects. It's really cool how all these things kind of connect. My mom showed me her her certificate of citizenship and my father's certificate of citizenship. You want to know the first thing I noticed on those certificates? Both their names are spelled wrong.
Yeah.
And it's because when they came over, and this story resonates with a lot of people who have come from other countries, somebody messes up your name along the way on the paperwork, and you don't say a goddamn word because you're not talking back to these people. You're showing respect. You're happy to be here. I mean, if you need to fix your name, fix your name. But in the 70s, when my parents came, they were just so happy to be here. They didn't care what they were called. But now, my mom's name is not really what it's supposed to be on this certificate of citizenship. I mean, talk about like a pretty awesome document to have. It's the piece of paper that says, "You're Canadian. Welcome. Enjoy the rights and the freedoms of everybody else who's Canadian." And her friggin' name's spelt wrong. And so is my dad's. So this name thing runs deep. And I didn't know how deep, and I didn't really give it the thought it deserved until Jason did his Ignite about the names and honoring people by their name and not taking that and doing something different to it. It can be that simple. It can be that simple. Um, anyway, I appreciate you listening to me talk about that, but these are the things running through me right now. And will it continue when September comes? I don't know. I would like to document some of it though. I've talked about it on Barba Grande. I think I want to put something together, some type of beginning, middle, end to help me deal with this. And maybe I'd love to record it on video somehow and then throw it on the Decoded site as a YouTube thing. Um, I don't know, dude. That's just, but this is the beauty of having this time off, that you can think. And sure, my mind is about my classroom, but it's also I got to get this stuff straight because for me it's important. I'm going to be working at a school that has a high population of ELL students. That comes they're coming from somewhere. So in a weird way, the universe has led me to this place, right? Because now I'm thinking about my identity. I'm going to be working with a lot of students who are more students than I ever have who are ELL. I need to be ready. I think I am. I think I'm going to the right place, but it just all seems to fit right now.
I've mentioned that name thing. You know, I've been in that. Okay, so Christopher John Clough. I mean, there's I don't have. It's fun. Okay, so to that end, if I can, I'll be light for a second. I think I've mentioned to you before. There's a high percentage of people that know me, don't know me personally, but have met me, that will call me Cliff. It is likely that if you dropped that in a group where you and I had overlap, where you and I were never actually in the same space there, but maybe our spaces overlapped. So the group in the center kind of knows the two of us. If you're to put into there and say, yeah, I was hanging out with Cliff on the weekend, there's a high likelihood they would think of me. It's a funny thing that in my time, and this was even back in high school, where me being misnamed has become a thing. And there are people at my first high school that from the beginning, maybe because of the slight echoey, poetic, I don't know, alliteration kind of a thing of Chris Clough, the in Chris became blended with the Clough part. And somehow someone started thinking my name was Cliff. And I was in a bunch of moments where a person calling me Cliff, it was kind of triangulated, was calling me Cliff, and I'm standing beside someone else who quite like they're bewildered by why I'm being called Cliff. And I just kind of roll with it. And they take my cue and they don't correct. They don't say like, who's Cliff? Like they just kind of go, obviously they're talking about Chris here. And then afterwards they say like, why didn't you correct them? I'm like, I don't know. I just kind of roll with it now. I've taken it on as a nickname interest, I guess, interestingly enough. And it was funny in talking with my colleague Pam, she didn't believe that this thing actually happened until two things happened. We were in that exact same situation. Someone in an open phone call, we were doing a conference call, spoke to me in the conversation, say, so Cliff, what do you think about this sort of thing? And I turn and I look at my colleague and I'm like, she's like walking out of the room. She's like, I can't believe that just happened. That was the first part. The second part was a time when she actually used it herself. She walked into the classroom. She's like, so Cliff, she's like, I can't believe I did that. I'm like, it happens. It happens with even the simplest of names. And in that case, it was just, I think, over familiarity and sort of pattern thinking. You sort of get into that mindset of other things. So that's my first, just to make the name thing light. I've never had, here's what I'll say. I've never felt the negativity associated with not hearing my name said properly. And if I'm going to lay that out, there's privilege. I've never felt like I lost something. I've never felt like I've been denied something. I've never felt like I wasn't seen because of I don't have a better way to say it, but I guess because of my privilege. I don't have a better word, but I'll put it that because of the privileges and because of let's say the stereotype predominant culture that I'm a part of, and never having things taken away from me because of my name, I did not feel any of the negativity. And I think about that often, how I can sort of take that space of not being addressed properly and make it feel light. The other thing that you make me think about in the name, and I don't know if I've shared it here, but I've shared it before, is that when I was working in hospitality, I had several individuals that for very personal reasons changed their names. One of the individuals that I ultimately interviewed for a kitchen position, on his resume was named Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know, have I shared this story with you? Arnold Schwarzenegger. The reason that, so I bring the person in, they interviewed, they're looking for a dishwasher job. They're looking for that first job. Start making some money, just need that first job. And regardless of who you are, what you are in the restaurant business, if you have no skills, you're getting a dishwasher job. Like you're not jumping in necessarily to something. That's the starting point. It's your access point to hospitality. I will say that when I was doing that hiring, working in restaurants, there were a high number of individuals that were either newcomers to Canada or had been here in Canada for a while and hadn't been able to secure that first job. So they were looking for work. When I got the stack of resumes, I did think to myself, I got to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger, because I had no sense. There was nothing else in the actual resume that indicated anything other than this person's name is Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I brought the person in, did the interview, was able to answer the questions, did have a little bit of restaurant experience, nothing formal, and was happy to start working as a dishwasher. So I hired the individual. It worked out. And this person ended up working at that restaurant for a few years. It wasn't until a year and change or a couple years in where I got to a space where I could ask the story behind the name. And he told me flat out, he changed his name. He changed his name when he came to Canada. In the process of coming to Canada, and there's a cost associated with that, and anybody can change their name, but he wanted a name that was recognizable. And that's really stuck with me. The idea that you would go that far, in order to be seen, is God, it breaks me to think about that, because I then will play it up against the fact that I don't feel the pressure points of my name being changed to Cliff. And why is that? The other story associated with hospitality, and I'm imagining that these might not be stories that are sort of widely shared, but I'm imagining that individuals that are trying to sort of get work and don't feel connected to the communities that they're applying to, I'm imagining the desperation to sort of find that edge. What is it that you're going to do to try and market yourself? That idea that you need to promote yourself. You need to have that pitch moment, whether or not these individuals would have that technical language, but they're trying to sort of make that connection. They want to work. I want a job. I want to work. The second story is, the first individual, that story is long in the past. I never had the opportunity to sort of check back in and say whether or not I could speak of this person's story. So I'll only address Arnold as Arnold Schwarzenegger. The other individual I did stay in connection with after restaurant, and his first name is Thavaraja. Amazing. There's something about the name. I love throwing down that name, Thavaraja. And if I were to say his last name, it has such a musicality to it. It's just a great name to be able to say. And when I think about my own, it almost makes mine feel boring to be able to say, to sort of fall off the tongue. But to that end, Thavaraja, this wasn't in me hiring that I found this out. This was in relation to Arnold's story. Thava, he would shorten it down. Thava said that it reminded him of his story. So this is how things connect, as you were mentioning before. Thava, for many of his first jobs in hospitality, he went by the name of Billy. And the reason that he went by Billy is because one of his bosses would not even attempt to say his name. And my question is, how does he get to Billy? Like, how do you get to, like, considering what your name is, Thavaraja, in the least, I guess you could have started with the T, build an anglicized name, common name off of that. He goes, I don't know. And there was never a question that Thava wouldn't go by Billy because he wanted the job. And I can remember talking to him about that. And I asked him, I said, can I use your full name when I address you? It put into question as to whether or not I had access to that part of him, because what I perceived to be starting as an insult, when that becomes internalized, I wondered if I was permitted to go to his name. And he did. He gave me permission, but he also said, thank you for asking. He said, thank you for sort of like seeing me. I will say it is interesting, though, that there were times where I would address him and he wouldn't respond right away, because what he had gotten used to hearing in his environment was either Billy or Thava. Now, I make a similar sort of comparison here. My full name is Christopher, right? And I actually tried to rebrand myself a few years ago and started introducing myself as Christopher, and it didn't stick. I couldn't make Christopher stick. I couldn't even in introducing myself to fresh, brand new people that didn't even know me as Cliff, they tended to shorten it right away to Chris. So when you no longer would recognize your name in public, when you no longer see it, I think about how profound a change in your identity that has occurred. So there's my two landings on that. I will say here's where that connects with my story. And as you start to say on camera, you can see where Roland just leaned in. He's about to sort of say something like, oh, wait, one more thing. Those experiences have fundamentally soaked my approach to my classroom, to the point where I've met mindsets that both Arnold and Thava have had after that in my classrooms, where the students have started to say, it's okay, you can just say. And my brain goes, I'm going to challenge this compromise in a way that I'm going to try and make the mistake of honoring the full name. And I'm going to push a little bit there. I'm going to push just a little bit. And if I get to a space now, me working with high school students, there may be a different space. Maybe I can push a little bit harder. Maybe I can push a little bit longer. I can hold that line and say, I want you to be able to hear your name in the classroom. And then maybe back off if they say, no, please don't. But I feel like I can sort of push just a little bit into that, say, I would appreciate if you gave me permission to call you by your full name.
I think too in high school, I wonder how much of their identities formed, like how much of the name that they were given in elementary school is now part of their world, whether they like it or not. Because when you were telling that story, I was thinking about the name that I was given. I didn't even like it. Like it wasn't even a cool name. They took my name Roland and they turned it into Rolo. Yeah. And being a little bit bigger than everybody else, it's even worse. So I'm like, yeah, when I think about it, I'm like, holy cow, like they couldn't even give me, they couldn't even turn my name into like something that I liked. Yeah, it's just, but you think in high school is different, right? And what I mean by that is like the hormones are flowing. Adolescence is a crazy time. We know that. Like scientifically, the brain is like firing like crazy, and there's hormones everywhere. It's messed up. One of the reasons why I don't want to teach high school kids. But who knows by that point how ingrained a name is, right? Or whether they think it's cool or not. And they're not thinking about the bigger social picture. Um, they're not thinking about their culture kind of being stripped away. And I don't think teachers give kids nicknames to strip culture away at all. I just think we need to be more aware of what we're doing and the impact it could have. But man, your stories about hospitality, holy cow. I feel like we've not dipped into the power of your lived experience in that realm, because you're right. When you start in a restaurant, you're washing dishes in the back, and nobody, now I've not worked in a restaurant that way, but nobody cares. Just clean the dishes, right? Like they're going to make sure they get paid and they're happy to have a job, and you as the manager's making sure that they're doing their job. That's where you start. And dare I say that when you're going to be a dishwasher in a restaurant, you're looking to have a job, because the people who do that, eh, okay, I'm gonna totally say some stuff here and I could be way off base, but the people who are gonna work in a kitchen, cleaning dishes, are the same type of people that I work with when I worked at a grocery store doing night crew. Okay, now it was funny because I got along with many of the people I worked with, but they were the first to tell you they hated people, and that's why they worked nights, and that's why they worked in a grocery store. They did not want to deal with people. There was something in from my perception, there was something missing in their lives. There was something that had happened that had led them to just not want to be around humans anymore, and they wanted to do it. They wanted to work in the middle of the night. Me, on the other hand, I needed a job. I didn't even think about cleaning dishes, but I should have, because it would have been I would have probably preferred doing that than working in a store by myself in an aisle for 8 hours. But I needed a job, and they always hired people. Like you should have seen the people that came through those grocery stores. Okay, it was the casserole of humanity, and it helped me. It really helped me realize that my work in school and university was important to me, because it was going to help me not have a job like that for the rest of my life, because that's I knew I didn't want to do that for my the rest of my life. So that was good. So it motivated me. But your talk about hospitality and starting at at the dishes. Now, I have to ask, how many of those dishwashers that you ever worked with ended up moving through the restaurant into a position of more responsibility in terms of serving or even cooking? Like, did you see a lot of that, or was there a huge turnover rate in dishwashers?
There is that element of dishwashers that it's easy to sort of look at dishwashing as the equivalent of migrant workers, because you're trying to get. I would agree. The task in itself, it's trainable. I can show you. I don't even have to talk. I can show you specifically and procedurally how to do the job amazingly well. So I can demonstrate the labor element of it. Of course, to be able to communicate and to be able to speak and to sort of write about it is important as well, but it's not necessarily a starting point. So to that end, whether or not it's your first job or it's your first encounter with having to sort of, let's say, speak English consistently, whatever your sort of landing point in there, whether, new Canadian or teenager, the design of the job is open to that type of opportunity. And I think it's easy to undervalue someone that comes in. I saw a lot of my colleagues, other restaurateurs, that looked at that as the sort of like the dump zone, as in you just hire whomever for the dishwashing position. But it at a very real level, it's kind of like the heart of your business. There's certain positions within a restaurant that when they start to get into the weeds, there's an exponential and immediate ripple effect to the rest of your business. And there's more than enough platitudes and sort of like social media posts about making sure that the individual that is kind of like the smallest grain in your organization, that they're being honored and supported and allowed opportunities for growth. And that was how we ran the restaurant. That's how I ran my restaurant, was with that potential. And we had a progressive path. Like it was, you wouldn't necessarily start a dishwasher if you had zero. Let's put it this way. More times than not, the people that I was hiring in as dishwashers had very little restaurant business per se. And what I mean by that, someone that was coming into my restaurant that was capable of running the front charcoal on a Friday night, I'm not cutting them at their knees and saying, I'm going to start you as a dishwasher just to have you prove. Because I find that in itself, you're going to have someone with hurt feelings and bruised sense of self from the get-go. So, I would sooner say for an individual coming in like that, I'm going to bring you in on a Thursday night. I'm going to hire you for one day. So we're going to get the training. I'm going to bring you in on Thursday night, and I'm going to observe you and see whether or not you have the skills that your resume says you do. So hired and potentially released if they couldn't deliver. So they got to do a test run, a paid test run, right? And I found that some individuals in that space were far more likely to sort of ascend from there because they were able to come in and show what they could do. Now, I wouldn't release them entirely because we're also having to sort of satisfy customers and sort of, but they would come in, they would get to show what they could do. The dishwashers coming in, the path from there would be if you came in with little experience and you started dishwashing, well, there's a whole lot you get to observe while you're dishwashing. And I would say to them flat out, when you get to a slow spot in your morning or in your afternoon or in your evening, just go around the corner. And it was interesting because Thava was one of the individuals that he was he was the salad guy. He was kind of like the veggie guy. That was his department. I already had spoken to him, as I had spoken to Robert and a couple of other individuals, and saying, when the dishwashers are caught up, I need for you to sort of like, don't just make them re-scrub something. Create another opportunity so they can start to see your job. And I would told them from flat out, when you get to a space where you're good enough at your job that you create, it's back to that podcast conversation that you and I said, when a podcast originally was taking you 7 to 10 hours to get out that one episode, but you get to a space where you can knock it down to 3 or 4. Well, you still have that extra 6 hours-ish. What are you going to do with it? So that mantra was what I offered up to anyone that started in the restaurant. And even if you want to sort of check out another position, if you get good enough at your job to create a space where you can observe what you think is the next level up, do it. Do it. Please look, because that becomes that sort of intersectional training where you create opportunity for yourself. Now, to that end, there were other individuals that came in, did dishwashing, that they were happy with dishwashing. It's what they wanted to do. if you sucked at dishwashing, it didn't matter. If you sucked at your job, it didn't matter. You wouldn't be around long. So I think that individuals that wanted to maximize their dishwashing work could still stay a dishwasher if they wanted to. It was just a very easy job for them. I think the risk is that when the work becomes too easy, that your brain becomes a little bit soft, and then you start to do things that kind of they betray your skill set. You know what I mean? There's something to that grind of the dishes coming in and you getting good at it and getting to your flow and washing and stacking when it's really busy. Sometimes the true measure of where you are at in your work ethic is when you do have the extra time. What do you use it towards? And for some of my staff, they got really good at their jobs that they were in, but when they had extra time, their assumption was that they got a smoke break, right? Yeah, a whole bunch of stories there. Or some sort of a break, that they've earned an extra break. So many times where I was the one that was underneath the dishwasher or the hot water booster or the grease trap, and I was the one that was in there doing a session with multi-staff, showing them how to fix it. I said, because I'm going to do this once. And then one of you out there is going to take care, because I have other things that I have to account for. Like there's other spaces I need to be in. I said, but any of you 6 could be on the floor right now, resealing the back of the grease trap. Disgusting job, by the way. But to that end, everyone had the opportunity to move forward. Some people were happy staying with their lot. They wanted, Thava needed to stay as the veggie guy because Thava was also working another job in the afternoon. So Thava was the guy that was there right away, ready to work. He got his work done. Plus, sometimes, like he created efficiencies. And then by 2 o'clock or 2:30, he was in at 7 in the morning. He'd be going off to his other job and walking up Yonge Street to another restaurant, at which he had an hour off in between. And then he would work from like 3:30 till 11:30 p.m. at night, and then go home, see his family for a little bit, come back in the morning and do it all over again. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No.
I'm usually a ninja with the mute button. And I'm telling you, this setup is killing me here. So I'm grabbing the mouse. What happened to him? Do you still talk to him?
Thava, I've lost. So Thava, I've lost connection with. There was one time when I was downtown Toronto, and I stopped by the other restaurant. So I stopped by his second job, and he was in there working. And it was just like, hey, how's it going? Good to see you. So and that was maybe about 3 or 4 years into teaching. So I managed to see him again. To this day, I don't know. Interestingly enough, earlier this week, I reached out to so when I was in the restaurant, my second in command was Maria.
Oh.
Have I ever spoken? Not Maria that I trained with, not Maria, the one that trained me as a chef, which was earlier than that. This was another Maria. I've reconnected with her on Facebook. I sort of thought, I'm just gonna reach out and see if she's out there. And it's interesting. There's already the conversations of like, you want to check in on who you are in your identity. Check in with somebody that you haven't seen for over a decade, that right away says something like, I've thought about you and wondered what you're doing and wanted to reconnect with you. Like, you really get a sense of distance, and when you try and step into that conversation, like, I don't feel like we're back to where we were. I think we're very much like, across the parking lot, you see someone that and something just compels you to like throw up your hand and scream out their name, and you're like, yo, how's it going? I haven't seen you in a long time. They're like, yeah, great to see you. And you kind of go on your way, but you walk away going, damn, like that's a good person. I really enjoy just meeting them for that moment. So it's kind of like, that's where I am with Maria right now. I don't know where the relationship will move forward. But I feel like the distance has created, there's going to be some pretty cool conversations, because we had a tight connection as her as a student, me as the sort of like, I guess, the teacher in that place. And that was the thing. She asked, are you still teaching? And she had said, I'm happy for you because you're a good leader and a good teacher. And that's flashing back 14 years. So I feel like it'll be interesting to reconnect with her and see what she's what she's got going on, because that's a whole part of my life. You talk about some of the repressed memories. I don't unpack that much. I don't. I don't unpack my hospitality days too much.
And why is that? Do you think it's going to take you to a place that you just don't want to be?
No, no, I can. There's tons of stuff to be able. Like there's so much. There's so many pieces there. I don't think it's. I think I put myself in places where, I when I think about the experiences that I sort of really enjoy, it's the experiences where I think about my growth, not in relation to the accumulation of skills, but my growth is the comes from my ability to reset the counter and do something entirely different. And it's not that I disappear from it. It's not that I sort of necessarily pack it away. It's just kind of like it becomes compartmentalized. Like it undoubtedly, the stuff that I've worked, the jobs that I've worked at, the people that I've met, all become the initial threads, the fabric of my life. I'm not going to deny that. But I feel like it's quilting, not stitching. So I have these kind of like pieces that I've stuck together, but very much like if I were to go through and say I did this job and then I took it to this level and then I changed jobs altogether and then I took it to this level. It's also why when she said, I wondered if you were still teaching, I thought to myself, that's clever because she gets me. Because I am the type that I could be doing something else now. Like it was 12 years ago we last spoke, 13 years ago, 14, sorry, that we last spoke. Whatever I threw down there as far as my personality, it's a reasonable assumption that I would be doing something entirely different. And that's kind of been the measure of my life doing these things. It's part of what drives me into September and taking on a different portfolio. So the challenge of sort of doing something different. So yeah, I'm not bearing it. I don't know if I don't have to be honest, most times when the conversation around being a former chef and working in hospitality is kind of at the dinner table when we invite people over and someone says, wow, it's kind of nice to have, kind of a chef in the house. And then they're like, nom, 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 nom. Like it doesn't get unpacked. It's like, they're just happy to be fed. And I'm like, okay, I can go there too.
That's cool. That's cool. Wow, man, see, it was easy to talk about this one today. This was not hard to do. You know what I mean? It's just we
Yeah.
went with the flow. Um, I have to admit though, last night I published our last episode, and I don't even remember what we talked about. So the description's really weak. It's like Roland and Chris do another episode of the Decoded podcast. Publish because I don't remember. And oh, I'm telling you this, I didn't have my headphones and I refused to plug in the speakers on this rig.
Yep.
Because of all the wires. And I know I'm tearing this down in a couple of days because the guy's coming back to work.
Right.
So I'm bare bones here, but I was just like, I got to push it out because I haven't pushed it out. So hopefully this episode won't be pushed out in like 2 weeks from now. And it looks like I'm back in town for the foreseeable future, and maybe you're around so we can continue to do this. But
wait, back in my town?
No, I'm back in my town.
Oh, you're back in your town. Okay.
Hey, I thought of your town yesterday.
Okay.
So a couple of weeks ago, Rib Fest was here in Kitchener.
Yep.
And then I stumbled and it was pouring rain. So we grabbed our food and we came home. But it's not the same experience when you can't sit around and enjoy the food at the actual fest, right? So I went online to look to see if there were going to be any other ones around me. And I read this article about this guy that apparently the Rotary clubs that run the Rib Fest, they don't like him because he went online and he was trying to figure out why certain little cities, especially the one that he lives in, wouldn't have a Rib Fest, and it's because population and politics and stuff. So he started running them, the ones that he would create. And so anyway, the Newmarket came up. Apparently in your area there's one that's the real deal Rib Fest, and then nearby to Newmarket there's one that's not the official Rib Fest. It's something this guy put together, but nobody knows, nobody cares. Like, I don't know who runs the Rib Fest here. I just go to it because It's good food. It's a family tradition. And so it was just funny because I'm reading this article and I see Newmarket and I'm like, hey, that's where Cliff lives. I had to throw that in there just for fun.
As I'm
Just
pointing at the screen, but I should have did that. Yeah, that's
I
funny.
love that people can't see what we're doing when they're listening to this, like from iTunes or Google Play, which is really cool.
That is
Thank you.
cool. When you mention,
Thank you, Google Play.
thank you, yeah, for including our feed.
Rodney Turner, um, a really cool educator in the States. He was in Arizona. He's now in New Jersey. And I'm friends with him on Facebook too. So, we get to like see each other's lives or whatever. I connected with him recently just to say, hey, I see that you moved to New Jersey. Hope all is well. And so he wrote back and we started talking podcasting. And he's like, so are you still doing Roland Chidiac Connects? I said, no, I let that one go, but I started a new one called Barba Grande, and I do this really cool one called Decoded with Chris Clough. And he was like, let me check it out. So he comes back at me, he says, this is really cool. And he had a screenshot, which I sent to you. And I was like, we're on Google Play? Like, I didn't know. And I remember you were like, how did this happen? I'm like, I don't know. I must have hit a switch or something. I don't know. I think it's cool. We're on iTunes. We're in the Google environment. We've got this YouTube thing going. So I think it's pretty cool. One thing I did want to say about Barba Grande is that I refer to you a lot because I don't talk to anybody else. So I'm like, I was having this conversation with Chris Clough, and people must be, whoever's listening to that must be like, who's Chris Clough? Well, you know what? If they're connected to Voice Ed Radio, they know who you are. But
I'm
to any,
findable.
you're findable for
Yeah.
sure. But at one point, you weren't even on the grid. You just turned off the power and left for a bit. But it's funny because I'll be like, yeah, I was talking to Chris Clough on the other podcast, and I was thinking about how do I move away from that? How do I move away from that? And then I think maybe I shouldn't. If that's where the conversations are happening
Mm-hmm.
and that's where like my thinking is taking me, then I should honor my thinking and go there, right? It's just funny. I think what I should do is re-listen to the 4 episodes of Barba Grande and then track how many times I refer to you. And then Chris Clough, from Decoded and Chasing Squirrels, I feel like I'm your advertiser.
I can start. Well, I make reference to. I mentioned the Barba Grande. I haven't heard EP4. EP4's dropped now.
Yes.
Okay,
It's out there.
I'll check that for sure. I think that I'm aware of it. I guess I'm aware of the potential for it, for the sort of like closed silo kind of conversation to kind of occur. Like I make reference to our conversations, our process, how Decoded. Like I feel like I've told the story of Decoded a few times. Sort of always changes. I don't really have it nailed, but I kind of try and give some idea of how it came to be. Inevitably, it also draws in the backstory of Hurley. It draws in Rodenizer. It draws in individuals like Lalonde. Like you start doing the whole tree diagram. I just don't know where to stop. I really don't. I don't know where to stop because it keeps going back and back and back. At some point, I land on, yeah, I kind of just wanted to start a podcast. Like, and I kind of gets that, but that's the most boring part of it. Everything else is the interesting. That's the life of the interconnectedness of this. So I think to a certain degree, the moments where I think, am I mentioning too much about the sort of the connections between the podcast? I sort of fall on the side of, no, I think I'm just modeling the opportunity. And if someone feels like I'm giving too much shine to any specific idea or person, then I think that to a degree, they have some growth to do. They need to kind of explore their own process, not kind of throw any shade on mine. So I'm okay with mentioning the connections and sort of revealing my process. Because the other part too is, even in telling that story 2 or 3 months from now, I'm going to have another layer to it. Like I'm going to be trying something else, another layer that has come because of the work, all that work that has led there. Make sense? So yeah, keep mentioning it. And if this, yeah, and if this,
said,
Yeah. It's like listening to the kids, you know. I can't tell you how many times you sort of are just in another room and or I'm in another room and I hear one of my kids say, I don't know if daddy would like you to do that thing. I'm like, are you actually calling out your sibling from the other room? You know what I mean? So for better, for worse, call me out however you seem.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Um, all right. Well, this has been another great episode of Decoded.
Can I close on something completely crazy?
Do it.
Just a um it's a quick experience, just a quick experience. And maybe this is a leap off point for next time. Maybe just for you to kind of, we definitely can't go into hour 3 on this one. But one of the things that one of the biggest, as I set this up, one of the most, the biggest, heaviest things that I'm carrying into the next school year, trying to make this will not be a simple off ramp. Last year, I had a student say to me, "You've ruined my life." It's a good one, eh? It's a good one. Yeah, you've ruined my life.
Now that's got to play differently in high school than it does in elementary. Because
I know maybe in the next episode I'll get into the bits and I can share the story with you. You know, um, what that statement instantly did was fracture me as a person, because it was a student in class in response to me following the rules. And again, I'll tell you the story afterwards, but I'm curious about these moments. I posted out on Twitter, what was the bestest mistake you ever made as an educator, and what did you learn from it? And I had a few people kind of respond to it. And that's what sparked me to ask that question, because I'm not entirely sure of my definition of the mistake in this context, but I will have that sort of, I'll carry that accusation, whether it's true or not. There's a whole lot of stuff that my own children say to me that I'm just like, you're just lashing out. But there was some truth in the decision that I made, is that there was the potential that I did ruin this child's life.
okay,
See, isn't
well,
that good?
yeah,
That's good bait, eh? That's good bait.
it's clickbait.
Yeah, that's
Actually, yeah, and the title of this week's episode should be Did Chris ruin the kid's life? That should be the tagline, and then would be like every other YouTuber where we don't mention anything about it right till the end. But
I hadn't even thought of that.
here's the first thought that I had when you said that. I thought right away, you're alt ed. You're working with spec ed. You're working with students who have needs. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean, like, you've always seemed to couch yourself in an environment in education where you're not working with regular stream students. And so I would think that you probably been told you've ruined lives like crazy, and that
No,
you've probably been, no way.
that's never been said, which is one of the reasons that it sticks with me.
See, to me, it's like a no-brainer. To me
I,
going into alt ed, I would expect people to tell me I'm ruining their lives, go to hell, I'm a horrible person. I would expect all that from the work you do.
I was told that, I wasn't liked, or there's been swearing around me in a couple cases, swearing at me, but for the most part, swearing around me, more not liking the context, not liking the work. And in that, I was able to kind of think myself through it. I'm like, well, this is kind of what, this is what we have. This is the menu we work from, and I'm going to stick with you. And I think I mentioned to you this before, that when students have come at me in that frame, I always kind of go, okay, now what? This thing has been said. This action, you've done a certain thing. Now what? And often the students in the past, they didn't have a tool for the now what, because they would have been shuffled off to the principal's office. So now we're left to deal with the now what. In this case, I didn't have a now what, because I understood where they were coming from. I understood why they would have said that. I understood the full implication. I really understood the full implication of me following the rule and our procedure and our in class protocol. And at the same time, despite the taking care of it according to the school rules, was the reality that the student's life could be ruined. Like that stark, like absolutely. It wasn't like a backhanded, complainy, whiny kind of thing. It was absolutely true. So the duality of doing what is right and creating something harmful at the same time. So, and I'll give you the context off.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, you dropped a bomb there, but it's all good. And I am thinking, since nobody watches this, I should do some clickbait type stuff. Chris ruined student life or something. I don't know. And then, but I'm such a nice guy. In the comments, I probably say go to 1 hour 52 minutes, and you can.
Are we at an hour 52?
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know. It's
okay.
10:08, and I think we started maybe 8:15. So
Okay.
maybe I don't know. I don't care either because it was good time, good chatting with you.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to the next one, and let's see if we're gonna go with this because I don't think I can tell you on air my biggest mistake as a teacher because I'm still teaching, and I'm not. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was nothing for all you people out there. It was not anything that I wouldn't lose my job over it. But I mean, I'm embarrassed, so I don't want to share it. But anyway, okay, dude. So it was good to connect with you again.
Absolutely, man.
I think we made up for it in the length of this podcast, and hopefully we get back on our schedule. We'll see, though. I mean, we're open and flexible, which is cool.
Absolutely.
Have a great long. This is a long weekend, so have a good one.
You too, buddy.
And we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
See ya.